Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia, here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and, of course, author interviews, the episode number 236 of the show. This week, I have 4 new reviews for you folks at home. Before we get into the show, want to make sure I give a quick shout out to our newest Patreon supporters. I've kind of forgotten to mention them. They signed up a couple months ago. David Bennet, David Goodin, and Tony Fino. Thank you guys for joining our Patreon and for helping to support the podcast, help keep it free and ad-free and all that great stuff. If not for the Patreons who support us there on Patreon for Geek Bites Podcast, I shouldn't say a LitRPG podcast because the Geek Bites Podcast, I did that first. The show wouldn't exist. So thank you guys. You help keep this show going on a monthly basis, covering the bells, the podcasting bells, as it were. So thank you very much for showing your support that way. So on to the show, though. I have 4 new reviews for you folks at home this week, and that's going to include Etinhym, Path of Graves, a LitRPG epic, Cipher's Quest, a sci-fi fantasy LitRPG, also 4Hex, a LitRPG strategy series, and Monster Hunting 101, a LitRPG fantasy adventure, Titan Termination, book number 1. So 4 titles for you folks at home. Before we get into that, we're going to go into LitRPG news, and we have some good stuff there. And in LitRPG news, we're going to make a wonderful shout out for a great author, Dave Wilmarth. His novel Battleborn is the latest entry into a new series of his. Very action focused. We gave it I believe a 7.8, 7.9 out of 10. And it was just like a little bit shy of great for us, but the world has shouted me down and said that it is amazing, it is great. A month after it was initially released, almost, the book has hit Amazon Top 100, which is super hard. It's top 100 out of all of the books on all of Amazon in the paid accounts, in the paid section. So people were really paying enough and for this not only get a bunch of number 1 tags and a bunch of categories, but also just be in the top 100, which is a great thing to do, and it's super hard. So congratulations to Dave Wilmarth for that success. I'm super happy for him. We'll link the show notes to you can pick it up, so of course. So go help him out. Go help him continue his trend. In other LitRPG news, we have J.D. Astra, author of the Firebrand Rooting A Lane series and also the Neon Dark story. She has started a Patreon. Not too many subscribers yet, but again, it's pretty new. So I want to give her a shout out and let you know that it exists. Again, Patreon is a great way to help support your favorite authors, favorite podcasters, or anybody else whose work that you love, and you just want to help them, continue their work, but also get nice little benefits like early releases of chapters or fan art or whatever else the authors or patrons are giving as tiers. So go check out her Patreon and support her if you like her work. Speaking of Patreon, usually we try to have videos in the front of it to let new people know what to expect and what the things are. And Blaze Corbin actually recently uploaded a new video explaining what his Patreon is, and it's a little silly, but I also thought it was really informative. I actually thought it was really cute. So I'll play it for you here just a little bit, just so you know.
Welcome to the Blaze Corbin Patreon page. This is where you can support Blaze Corbin if you like his work, and even read chapters before they are published. You can also see new art from rough draft to final, and give busy feedback on everything he's currently working on. But wait a second, who is Blaze Corbin? Since you're here, you probably already know, but I will still explain. Blaze Corbin is a best-selling and award-nominated science fiction and
Okay, so there you go. I mean, that and everything there is totally true. I just want to ruin your enjoyment. I thought it was super cute, though. We'll link in the show notes for the video and, of course, his Patreon. If you want to support him there, it's just a cute, super uber cute intro video by a delightful young woman. So there you go. Loved hearing from her. In other LitRPG news, we have a great deal from the author of Geek Wars, A.E. Williams. His latest book is out now. It's actually more of a novella. But his first book is going to be on sale. So it's actually going to give it away for free from July 23rd to July 27th. So if you have any chance to check it out, we give it a score of 7.4 to 10. It's actually a RPG apocalypse story with the husband and wife team. And so even though the cover isn't amazing, it's probably the weakest part of the story. It's actually an entertaining story, good combat, and I'm interested to see where the next book goes when it does come out. Actually, when it's out now, I just haven't read it. So link in the show notes for the free book and also the new novella in the series that's out now. And last but not least, we have Sound Booth Theater announcing this week that they have revamped their website and it's live now. So the new website for the Sound Booth Theater, they list all their authors, narrators, and the entire interface is pretty smooth and pretty. I should fully disclose that the Sound Booth Theater is a official sponsor of the LitRPG audiobook podcast, which I also produce and edit and put together and post. But even if I wasn't, Jeff is a great guy. I love his team. I've hung with him before in person at various events. And they always do really wonderful work in bringing to life the characters that LitRPG authors create. And it was a great broadcast. They actually had a nice live launching party on Thursday, July the 23rd. It lasted for about 2 hours. I was there for about half of that. I had to go, record this podcast and get the show notes together for it. But it was just fun hanging out with them. I was the quiet person among many extroverts rather. And I'm a little bit introverted, so I didn't say too much. But I did enjoy speaking with them and talking with them and hearing them, the entire team to kind of chime in and goof around. You could tell that they're really comfortable and they're kind of this close-knit family group. There were a couple other guest people in there as well, including James and Cyrus Baldwin, Nicholas Grand. Some other folks came in and out. I believe Pac Finter was also there as well for the section after I left. And they do some readings from a couple authors submissions, so it was fun to hear them kind of mess around and goof around, but it's just kind of a fun, good time. We'll link in the show notes for that particular event and also the revamped website for Sound Booth Theater. So there you go, guys. Into stuff that is out now for you to enjoy. I have read this first when I wrote it. Mechanical Crafter, book number 2, written by Ramon Mejia. It is out for you to enjoy. Tells the story of Repair, someone who's reincarnated into a new RPG fantasy world that kind of mixes, if Harry Potter met the Industrial Revolution kind of situation, where it's magic and industrial fantasy. The main character is a mechanical person. It kind of a Warforged-ish character. Again, not using that term. Just giving you a close example. But he's also a crafter, and in this particular book, the crafting is doubled. There's a lot more dungeon. I mean, this book is actually about 70% as long as the first book. It's a much longer story. It just comes out that way. I'm a wordy writer, but it's there for you to enjoy. Go check it out. Lots of good stuff in there, and it's a fun story. Also, Altho is going to be The Source, Anora Fireborn, book number 1. Also, right now, I actually started reading this one yesterday. Gamified, book number 1, Beastmaster. It's actually turning out surprisingly good. I'm only about 10% into it. But it's already a very entertaining story. I can see why it's already, I think, in the top 500 on Amazon, even though it's only been out for a couple of days and already has 24 positive reviews. So I'm enjoying it, but not a full review yet. Haven't finished it. It may take some more turns. It's happened before, but so far I've enjoyed it. Also out there is Blade Walker, Chronicles of the Storm Shadows, part number 1, as is War Fantasy Online, a little bit standalone novel. Also out is the 3rd book in the Divine Apostasy series, Uru's Third Temple. Also out is the Dimensional Wars, book number 2, Soul Bond. A new story is going to be the Heavens Boxer, LitRPG Esports Mecha Battles. So looks different, but it's out for you to enjoy. Also, it is Olympus Reborn, book number 1, Unmarked. And also Condition Evolution, book number 1, which is a little bit of a shorter story. I had to double check to make sure and look into it before. The cover art is really janky, but it is LitRPG. So I don't know much more about it than that. Then I scroll through it to make sure it was actually, but it's out. And also, last but not least, the Gin Tamer, the complete Bronze League trilogy box set is. I don't normally list like republished stories or box sets in general, but this was kind of an undervalued series for a lot of people. I enjoyed the novels on the whole. It's one of the only series that kind of captured that Pokemon pet battling atmosphere in a little bit of stories. Some other novels have tried it and just didn't do a good job of it. This one did. If you were interested in a story that does take the Pokemon concept and extrapolates it to something more of a real world vibe situation where people take advantage of monsters, and there's also a whole industry set up around monster battling, this is probably going to be a good fit for you. Plus, it's an amazing deal. I think it comes out like 999 pages of the box set for one Kindle Unlimited read, or like $3. So it's like a really good deal, which is why I put it up on our new releases. Okay, on to new audiobooks. So there is a lot that's come out this week as audiobooks as well. Radioactive Revolution, which I believe is the second book in that series. Life's Reset, book number 4, called Human Resource, which is a new arc in the Life Reset series. I enjoy the book immensely. Also out is season 1 of Blood Games, and the Rise to Omniscience, book number 6. Silver Spear is out for you to enjoy as an audiobook, as is the third book in the Bad Guy series, Skull and Thrones, and also Phantom Campaign, Card Mage, book number 2, and the second book in the Black Flame Online Universe Square Formation Empire series, book number 2, called Path of Light, which again just has like the longest title ever, but it is out for you to enjoy. On to upcoming LitRPG, where I just read up a bunch of stuff for you to enjoy or read about that's coming out in the near future, including the second book in the Eternal Online series, out on July 28th. The first book in the Era of Justice series, out on July 31st. The fourth book in the Space Season series, on July 31st. On August the 4th, it'll be The Hidden Paladin. August the 4th, also, it'll be Modern Paladin. Yeah. 2 paladins right next to each other on the same day. Who would have thought? On August the 15th, it'll be The Eternal Journey, book number 2. And August the 5th, it'll be the second story in the Dungeon Fairy series, written by the amazing Jonathan Brooks, who's done amazing work with his Dungeon Core novels. On August the 8th, it'll be The War of the Posers, Bad Guys, book number 4. August the 11th, the second book in the Heavenly Throne series. On August the 18th, Intellectium. August the 23rd, Multiverse, book number 2, The System. August the 24th, it'll be the fourth book in the Dungeon of Perdition series, War of Gods. August 25th, it'll be Dream Stream Reality. August 27th, Small Unit Tactics Volume 1. September 4th, rather, Discardium, book number 5, The Holy War. September the 9th is going to be Dungeon Worlds, the Reborn Online series. September 15th, The Underhill Chronicles, called Stolen Lives. September 30th, the fourth book in the Gods Game series, Volume 4, Sovereigns. October the 1st is going to be Final Odyssey, the 7th book in the Legends Online series. October the 2nd, looking forward to seeing what weird thing Matt Dinneman does, called Dungeon Crawler Carl, out again on October the 2nd. October the 6th, it'll be the third book in the Life in Exile series, called Watcher's Fate, I believe. Book number 2 just came out last week. October the 7th, it'll be City of Goblins. October 26th, The Other World, Underdog, book number 4, which is a kind of a fun series I'm a fan of. And last but not least, Eternal Online, book number 3, out on October 27th. So there you go. All the stuff and now it's coming in the near future. On to the new releases and reviews. And first up this week is Etinhym, Path of Graves, book number 1. And you know what? The author's name isn't on the cover. I just realized, like, wait a second, that is not correct. We know the author. It is E.A. Hooper. That's right. I'm like, took me a second. I had to look it up. It is 492 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. The light pantheon rules from above, the dark pantheon rules from below. Together they defeated the other divine races and became the masters of Etinhym. Edric is the son of the Grave Queen, but he was raised in the Crown Realms as part of the alliance between the two pantheons. After reaching the age of 13, he's finally able to choose the path that will allow him to acquire demigod abilities and explore the many realms of Etinhym. Although his goal is to become a Grave Lord, serving under his mother, he finds himself following the trail of a conspiracy that threatens the divine pact that has kept the Jotuns and the Valkyries, the greater demons, and the dragons from uniting against the gods. Edric's story will take him through strange realms, from a spatially disoriented forest that twists and turns on itself to a living ocean of blood, and even a skyscape full of floating castles. He'll also have to face off against strange monsters, corrupted spirits, and even towering abominations. If he fails, then the war that follows will likely be the last war Etinhym ever sees, a war that will surely lead to the extermination of the human race. So there you go. This story overall was kind of an okay read for me. Most of that is because of the theme of the story and some of the tonal things. There's nothing technically writing or on technical writing level that's bad about it. I just never really connected with the main character and the story world. It's kind of a take on a multiverse with gods and demigods trying to gain power by killing monsters that infest the various realms. So you're actually seeing influences from like Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all the different pantheons kind of existing at one time. However, despite the many monsters the main character kind of faced, there was really no serious threat for the main character, who is a demigod. I think that was part of the reason why it was hard for me to connect the main character, because he is a demigod, so he isn't exactly had a troubled human life or really kind of struggles for anything. I mean, he does grow in power by killing monsters for their soul points or doing tasks for karma points and using those to buy new abilities or to increase like his health or his I forget what it's called. Like he only has like 2 stats though. I believe it's like intelligence and health or something. But it always kind of seemed like it was a predetermined power gain, because a lot of the powers are just out of the realm possibility for what he had. And you could say like, oh, they're going to connect in a certain way, and they generally did. And that was just the story. It's like, and so I just never could connect with that demigod thing, because he never seemed like there's any real threat to him. And it kind of seemed foreordained that his adventures would succeed, which kind of fits into the demigod thing, which might have been the point. But for me, it just kind of stopped me from connecting with. But the action was decent enough. I was like, okay, I guess overall I enjoyed it, but it's kind of an okay read. There was nothing really like super outstanding. I give it a score of 7.1 out of 10, which is like just barely in the, okay, I guess I like this range. The game mechanics in the story aren't particularly like inventive. They pull from a lot of other action RPG kind of systems. So like the main character, instead of having health points, has hearts that can increase. So there's a Zelda nod there. But besides like the karma points and soul points buying powers, there wasn't really, any real RPG like decisions or like a deep system there. Again, the action was kind of the thing that was the saving note. It was just good enough to keep me reading. And to see how he used the upgrade powers in interesting ways and fights and everything. That was kind of the thing that kept it over that 7 line, but it was kind of it was definitely a close thing. So it's an okay read if you want something that's like Greece, Norse, or demigod themed with fairly decent action RPG elements. So for me, it gets scored again 7.1 out of 10. Etinhym, Path of the Graves with a score of 7.1 out of 10. And next up, I have Cipher's Quest, a sci-fi fantasy LitRPG, Ciphercraft, book number 1, written by Tim Kiever. It is 301 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. A real-life game system lost millennia ago could turn the tide of a galactic war. At first, Colin thought the strange writing in the air was his imagination, but the power and drive to follow its quest was undeniable. The reward, on the other hand, too valuable to pass up. He and his crew pulp space to a prison under siege where the Cipher has quested him to rescue 2 telepaths who've seen the Cipher's quest too. This bounty hunter and the mother-son duo of telepaths must utilize level-up bonuses and new class skills to survive an alien jungle where the EMP-throwing tigers aren't even the greatest threat. As Cullen recovers ancient textbooks that could unlock the power of the Cipher for all, they encounter reject telepaths who hunt their jungle like berserkers, looking for revenge and a way home. Just like Cullen, Eli and her son are just happy to escape prison. Now they find their freedom came with a cost, like any true power worth wielding. In their race for survival, they will uncork dark secrets about her husband's death and the dangerous testing that turned her and her son into telepaths without their consent. Welcome to Reject Jungle Dungeon. No quest is easy that involves telepaths, even if it's your first one. There you go. Full disclosure, I received a copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This has a different setting. It's not a virtual reality story. It's not even transported to a game world story. The story takes place in an alternate universe where there was once a lost ancient technology we would describe as an RPG interface. And that's the extent of the game mechanics. Like, the game mechanics aren't for everybody yet in this particular first book. It's more like a lost technology that three people in the story kind of have access to. And it's more along the lines of quest notifications and them being assigned classes and them getting experience points on leveling, but it not really doing much beyond that. And that's kind of the extent of the game mechanics in this particular book. And even the author in his novel description kind of says, oh, for LitRPG Crunch, this is going to be about a 4 out of 10, which I was like, oh, hey, I wonder if that's a nod to this podcast and just being honest, which I totally appreciate. And that score is fairly accurate. Like, there's not a lot of crunch or a lot of in-depth game mechanics, which was a problem for me. That's kind of what I love about the genre of LitRPG, is that the game mechanics do have a full impact the same way that physics or like a good magic system would, and that just doesn't really exist here. And another like storytelling point, I was super confused when I read this. Like, the beginning of this novel was just like, oh, I was just kind of dropped into the story. Which didn't turn out to be like a bad story world, but I was just kind of dropped in with these characters with things happening, and there wasn't really like an opening section that described who these people were, what this world was, or what was happening. And so I was like super confused for like the first 15% of the story. And while eventually that all kind of cleared up, that the beginning section was like, what is happening with these people and these names that are being thrown at me and these events? And I kept having to reread sections to kind of figure it out, which isn't the best, for me at least, introduction to a story world and embodying with characters. Eventually, I kind of came to understand what was happening, who the characters were, but it took a good little long of a time. And part of the story is like, it's just mystery what the Cipher system is. And to us, it's like, oh, it kind of seems obvious. But it's something that's hidden away from the characters in the story, which again kind of highlights the fact that the RPG system isn't a pervasive thing for everybody in this story universe. So the RPG mechanics in the story are kind of light, to say the least. I already kind of touched on base with them all. The classes, the bounty hunter, the altars, which are meant in the novel description, weren't really fairly developed. Like, these characters kind of got skills for doing things, but they didn't really feel super impactful, and their classes on a whole weren't developed. Like, they didn't get special class abilities that they got to choose or anything for skill points or class points or anything. They just kind of unlocked powers. And so the entire RPG system or interface kind of felt like it was analogous to just, oh, this is a way for them to become uber powerful in comparison to normal people or their enemies. And the telepathic aspect was developed a little bit more as kind of a standalone power, not real witness necessarily to these classes. At least in this book. In the end of the book, there is some wiggle room and like, oh, they get an option to choose a particular path for their class. But again, that's not developed in this novel, which is what I'm reviewing. So overall, the game system just didn't really feel integral to the system, but rather like an interface or technology to advance power. And you could have actually just replaced all that RPG stuff with just like a reference to a lost technology, and it kind of would have been the same story to a degree. But I'm not saying that this isn't an RPG. It is. There's plenty of notifications. The author goes out of his way to have the characters reference this as this important thing, and there's plenty of like acknowledgments of the notification, so it's not like it's not part of the story. But again, didn't feel integral. I think again the author's honest about the level of crunch in the story being a 4 to 10 was accurate, and I totally respect that. The story itself again it kind of finds itself eventually around like the 15-20% mark of the story, for me at least, where I eventually understand the goals of the story, the stakes, and a bit of the world building. But the beginning was so confusing to me. I'll be honest, I was a little checked out by that point. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I can't say that I care. Because I spent like 150 pages, whatever, or 100 pages, kind of trying to just figure out what the heck these people are, what this world was. And so eventually, as the story goes on, it does do a little bit of a better job of fleshing out characters, fleshing out the world. I just didn't connect with it at that point. Again, part of that was the fact that I could already tell from the very beginning that the RPG stuff wasn't going to be impactful. And as the story progressed, even though like there's action, adventure, and like some twist in the storyline, it didn't really wasn't super enjoyable for me because I already had figured out, the RPG stuff, it isn't integral to this world, and it's not something that everybody has access for. It's really just analogous to, you're getting power-ups, you're becoming more powerful, and this is kind of a visual reflection of that, for at least for now. In this first book, the author does say that this is a first step in the development of that system in future series, but for now, it's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go check out book number 2 or 3 or whatever, because this one didn't kind of satisfy the LitRPG, desire that I love. So overall, the story just didn't work for me. The Cipher system didn't feel impactful beyond directing characters to plot points or as a way to get them power boost. The sci-fi elements, this is set in like this alternate sci-fi universe. Those sci-fi elements weren't really fleshed out. Like I could almost see this as a good sci-fi story if those elements had been fleshed out. I was like, this is an interesting power system. This is interesting technology. This is where it's developed. And I got details on that side. But that wasn't the case. So this is more of a sci-fantasy kind of story system, even in that respect. And again, while there is eventually good world building and decent character development, it wasn't really enough to keep me engaged with the story. So for me, I get to score 6 out of 10. It doesn't work for me because of the reasons I stated. Might work for you. You might not really care that this is not a particularly like deep RPG system that's impactful. You might prefer the other story elements, which again aren't necessarily bad on their own. It's just together just didn't work for me. So for me, it gets to score 6 out of 10. Cipher's Quest, a sci-fi fantasy lit RPG, Cipher Quest book number 1 with again a score of 6 out of 10. And next up we have 4X for Hex, a LitRPG strategy series, Avila Online, written by Amber Lane. It is 520 pages, $3.95. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Jaden likes to mind his own business. It's the best way to survive in the favela. When an unfortunate set of events force him to from the shadows of insignificance, he finds himself in the crosshairs of the biggest, baddest crime lord in the whole of the favela, the one and only Tarisco. Fortunately, Lady Luck is shining on Jaden in the form of a mysterious goddess who places him smack bang in the middle of a power struggle between two of the richest men in Texatron. One thinks he can mold any Tom, Dick, or Harry into the greatest civilization builder of all time, rivaling even the king of the Avila, Builda, FOH Smart Town, while the other thinks he'll fall flat on his face. Propelled to the virtual world of Avila Online, Jaden has 6 months to build his civilization up to rival that of Builda, or he'll be thrown out and have to face Tarisco's retribution. So there you go. Okay, this didn't work for me overall. And I've really enjoyed Amberlane's other works. I think the other story, they were Dragon Mist, great. I mean, it's really good. I enjoyed it as a strategy, and I think a lot of other people have as well. This one didn't quite hit the same notes of enjoyment. I think it shifts gears around. It takes a little bit too long to kind of find its pacing. The beginning of the story on the strategy building side was a little, I don't want to say loosey, but it felt a little like the main character didn't have, I forget the word, he wasn't choosing his own path. He doesn't have his own ability to kind of form his own opinions. He very much kind of felt like he was led around and having everything explained. Even though he says that he's played this game before, like Ripple's or strategy games, every single mechanic is explained to him, and he kind of follows the advice of every other person that kind of tells him what to do, which felt like a really weird character trait for somebody who grew up poor and worked for the mob. Like, you feel like he would have a natural instinct of being suspicious or looking out for himself or looking for people's, side motivations. But instead he comes off as this super sweet, innocent kind of character, who's just like believes anything everybody says and kind of gets led around. So like anytime there was a conflict, it was kind of managed for him. He's about to get swindled out of a sweet mine deal. Someone rescues him. He needs to make the best deal to secure this mine and workers. Someone does it for him. Or they tell him how to negotiate. They tell him how to develop and his territory and his town and how to direct his resources. They even power level him, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine. So the main character felt like he didn't have his own ability to grow on his own, which was kind of a sad, kind of a sad sack for me. At least until probably about the midway through the story. In that case, his decision making shifts, but still, like, that first half of it was a little bit of swing on that personal progression aspect. On the game mechanics side of things, Emerald always does a really good job of developing actual and very interesting strategy and town building mechanics. No complaints there whatsoever. The game mechanics are a little bit mixed with a real-time and turn-based combat. There's real-time combat for the monster fighting, and there's turn-based combat for the player versus player combat, which I thought was an interesting choice. And it does provide a little bit of variety between the two styles. At the same time, I don't think it actually works in the story. It provides some interesting ways for the main character to get out of some sticky situations. But at the same time, I thought it was kind of annoying that there were two different systems. It just felt like an inconsistency in my gamer brain. I was like, pick one or the other, please, and just stick with it. Like, I wouldn't have minded if it was all turn-based or if it was all real-time, combat. But the difference between just because we're finding a human versus a NPC or versus a monster just felt weird. So it just didn't work. But I do appreciate that the author took the risk in combining them. It just didn't work for me. Beyond that, there's a lot of standard stuff: stats, XP, skills, classes. This is a crunchy story. The main character's classes unlocks abilities. In this case, the new buildings he can build, and the building stuff is really gamified, like kind of drag and drop, which is really common for like a strategy game. There's lots of options to build, and there's kingdom stuff that starts at about the 30% line where he's expanding his kingdom from his one hut, building, to bring in citizens, to trying to manage resources and balance those things with building specialty structures like mills and quarries and barracks, and all that strategy for X stuff is getting always really developed well. The author in any of the series that they write. It's kind of the other things in the story that for me was like, oh, that doesn't work. Again, I talked about the odd personality conflict. The story shifts a little bit, about 50% into the story. Like, up until that point, what was described in the novel description is absolutely 100% true. But as of like the 50% of the story, there's almost like this chosen one aspect that's more developed, and he starts expanding beyond his little kingdom in these like mini adventures, and it becomes a little bit more focused on just doing adventuring stuff to unlock abilities or expand his territory, and that to me was an interesting choice because it kind of took away a little bit from the actual kingdom building and the game mechanics that existed there, and it. I'm not the only one who's kind of felt this way. Looking at the reviews, it's like, oh yeah, that shift didn't please everybody. It didn't kind of tie in well to the first half of the story, particularly well, unfortunately. So for me, this was just kind of a miss. The fighting was fine. I liked the strategy mechanics. That's always a strong suit for the author. Again, with the exception of the fact that the real-time and turn-based combats didn't quite mesh well together for me in my brain. But on the whole, the pacing and resource-based strategy mechanics aren't going to work for everyone in the first place. And so that's a certain pool of characters and readers, and shrinking that down further with with kind of this mixed system just didn't work well for me. However, if you like a strategy system, if you like a good, like solid core mechanics there, you might still like this. Like you really might. Like that might be enough if you're a super big fan of like 4X strategy games. Like this might be right up your alley, and you can kind of ignore some other elements, or you might really enjoy them more than me. For me, the mix didn't really work well though. So I get the score 6 out of 10. Not 4. That's a bad score. 6 out of 10. That's just, it doesn't work for me. Not necessarily. It's not a negative score necessarily. It wasn't boring. A lot of good elements, but on the whole, the mix just didn't work for me. So that's 4Hex, a lit RPG strategy series of Avila Online, with the score of 6 out of 10. And last for the week is going to be Monster Hunting 101, a LitRPG fantasy adventure, Titan Termination, book number 1, written by Andrew Karvik. This is 313 pages. It is 99 cents. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. When I climbed out to the surface this morning to scavenge some food for my village, I knew the odds were severely stacked against me. A mere nurse, I had no business going out into the sun where all kinds of monstrosities roamed. But what other choice did I have? All of our scouts had already perished on previous surface runs, leaving us few other options. It was either take the gamble or let my people die. As if to prove my fears right, I was only out in the open for a few minutes when a pack of Kinru spotted me. Standing absolutely no chance, I started to run for my life, but was quickly cornered by one of the fearsome beasts. In a last desperate attempt to defend myself, I managed to hurt one in the face. Right before the creature was snatched by an even bigger monster that turned it into a snack. Then, everything became a blur. When it came to, I wasn't the same anymore. As it turns out, wounding the Kinru had earned me some mystical energy called blood points, which gave me access to the Hunter's Sight. Now, wherever I look, I have strange words floating before my eyes, urging me to assign those blood points to gain incredible skills and abilities. Moreover, if I managed to kill a monster in the future, it would seem that I could use its bones to craft powerful talismans and its organs to brew magical potions. As I'll learn, there's a name for people like me who've unlocked the Hunter Sight, Venators. But if those new talents give me a chance to survive on the surface, I'm still very much a green and weak Venator. I will need to keep hunting monsters if I want to increase my points and provide for my people. Who knows, someday I might even grow strong enough to reclaim the surface from those foul beasts, and the worst of them all, the Titans, the dreaded giants which drove humanity underground in the first place. So there you go. That is quite the description. It's fairly accurate in the main character's motivations. But frankly, I was bored reading this. I mean, that is as simple as it gets. It gets a score of 5 out of 10 for me. I was just bored reading this, and I put it down several times and I had to come back to it. And I genuinely thought, can I push my way through this? And at some point I was like, I kind of had to. It's only fair. I can't judge a novel just by the beginning or the end or the middle. I got to read the whole thing just to see if it pulls itself out. This one didn't. The fights are decent. Like probably the best part of the story, or some of the fights are interesting. But everything else between those fights, the development of the story was just kind of so slowly paced that I had a hard time staying awake. I really actually fell asleep the first time I kind of went through the beginning of the story. And again, it's not like it's bad technical writing. It was just like the dialogue and the pacing outside of the fights just was so slow. It put me to sleep. The game mechanics are okay. There's nothing really original. The main character chooses to be a scout when she discovers blood points. But the system itself wasn't, I didn't like it. It felt one-wavy. The main character gets blood points and she can buy abilities or buy things within her skill system. But she doesn't really have to earn the power. Like, she doesn't earn that first power. She's saved by somebody. And every time she fights and kills, everything she buys as an ability or a skill point is automatically makes her an expert to a certain degree in that. So she's never really having to work to be a hunter, how to learn bow. All that knowledge that makes her to an adequate level where she's bought is kind of automatically implanted in her mind. So there's a sense of like she's not earning her power that she gets, which is kind of a thing for me. We're like, oh, that makes it feel a little cheap. So that those things combined kind of just made this not entertaining for me and kind of made it boring. So that's me though. Again, aspects of it were perfectly fine. Like the eventual twist with the monsters. Like, oh, that was okay. That was kind of neat. I liked the thematic setting and the hints of what's happened to the world, but it just didn't work for me overall. I had to push myself to finish the novel, and it's not wasn't enjoyable experience for me. It's just not bad. I'm not thinking it's a terrible story. It's not getting that bad of a story. It's just I was bored. So I get to score 5 out of 10. Monster Hunting 101, a LitRPG Fantasy Adventure Titan Termination book number 1, with a score of 5 out of 10. Okay, folks, that is it for the show. Thanks very much for listening, for watching, for hanging out with me today while I reviewed these stories. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our website at littlepodcast.com. And of course, we have links in the show notes for a bunch of great groups where Little Bit authors and readers can hang out and talk and share memes and kind of goof around with this genre that we love. And remember, if you enjoy the podcast and want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways you do so at littlepodcast.com/support. But again, if you want to support the podcast this week, and go buy the book. Go buy the Minecraft book number 2. If you like book number 1, you're probably going to like book number 2. And if you like it, leave a review. We're super close to like 100 reviews on Amazon for book number 1, and I kind of want to, I don't want to push over that mark there. But again, book number 2 is out for you to enjoy if you're watching this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did reading it, or writing it rather. And I'm working on book number 3. Thanks again for hanging out with me today, and until we can hang out again, folks, don't remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.